Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, Keep Going, You'll Get There Eventually, with Mark Hill MBE. We talk about the army giving him the passion to learn languages, moving house 19 times in 24 years, and his accidental STEM activity in Iraq that led to saving lives.
Mark joined the British Army at the age of 17, with 30 years regular and reserve service as a modern-day Sergeant Major. He is passionate about developing his soldiers to be their best. He's had some fantastic opportunities travelling the world and learning to speak Arabic. He was awarded 2 operational commendations for distinguished service and for exceptionally valuable service in support of operations. Being presented with an MBE by Her Majesty the Queen has been the highlight of his career. He is now the Army's Community Youth Engagement Officer within the North East and Yorkshire, inspiring others. So Mark, thank you ever so much for joining us on the Inspiration North podcast, all the way from Catterick Garrison. What's the weather like down there?
Overcast, and it's been spitting. It was spitting earlier.
Oh yeah, it's typical northeastern weather then. Raining here in Newcastle too. Hopefully when we put this out it's not going to be raining, but you never know. So we always start our podcasts with the question, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
That's a good question. And as a young boy, like most young boys, they dream of becoming a footballer. Right, I had those dreams as well. I wasn't very good at football. I was always playing in defence, or maybe stuck in the goals. But I think in my later teens, before I left school, I had thoughts of maybe becoming and working in the Forestry Commission. So that was my ideas. Didn't plan out that way. So I suppose Forestry Commission, but also growing up, some of your listeners out there might remember the programme CHIPS. So the Californian Highway Patrol, I had visions of doing that, but you do when you're younger. But I think my memories is working in the Forestry Commission. I kind of enjoyed that in school. The rural science lessons sort of thing would maybe push me that way.
Okay. So when did your dreams change, I suppose?
Yes, well, I didn't do particularly well in school, I must say, although the memories are, I always attended school. I left school at the age of 16, because in them days you could leave school. I didn't get a job straight away. I went to one of those government youth training schemes. I think they call them the YTS. So I also had ideas of becoming a chef. So I went to college once a week and I worked in a bakery, which I loved, in Batley in West Yorkshire. And I also did some time in a restaurant preparing starters and helping out that way, and it wasn't for me. I didn't kind of enjoy it. It was long days getting the bus to where I had to go to. We didn't have a car. For me, really, growing up, I do what I call now extracurricular activity outside of school. So I was always into athletics. I joined a running club at the age of, I want to say 12 years old, and I did martial arts, karate, boxing, and I settled down in the running club and the Army Cadet Force. So I joined the cadets at the age of 13 or so. And I had no job, 17 years old. And I always remember walking past the Army Careers Office in Bradford. And I remember being a cadet and, maybe what about joining the Army? And I know my granddad was in the Army, but, he passed away when I was younger, so later on. So I didn't really have much encouragement about the armed forces. But I've been in the cadets and looked at the courage, and I went through the door and I said, I'd like to join the army, please. And the soldier behind the desk was a Duke of Wellington. So I joined the 1st Battalion, the Duke of Wellington's regiment. They gave me a train ticket and I went to York, to Strensall, to do my basic training.
What do you think it was about the army then? Once you've gone in the office, you talk about it, what do you think appealed most about that as a next step?
Yeah, I think, well, coming from a council estate, we never had much money, and it was the appeal of the soldier would talk about adventure, We talk about money, 3 square meals a day, and it was a belonging, I suppose, and being belonged to something, albeit I'd not joined. I had to go through that journey of joining, doing the training, and making that commitment. So I remember stood at the bus stop saying goodbye to my mum and my grandma, and I got the bus to Bradford, and then from Bradford, town centre, to York. And I remember the corporals stood at the York station, herding people, the new recruits onto the bus, and we drove out into the countryside. It seemed to be a long way. I mean, I know where Strensall is now, but at that age, it seemed to be a long ride on the bus. And I did my basic training in Strensall in North Yorkshire.
What did you think about it when you got there? Was it what you expected?
It's a long time ago now. I've spent like 31 years in the army. You're in the army. The stories of my granddad would say, they'll make a man of you, and you'll learn things, and everyone got the same haircut, and everyone's in the same boat. When you first join, I think it's the first 6 weeks, everyone's in coveralls, so you look the same, and then you work on your drill, your passing out parade, to get that proud moment of exchanging your forest cap for your regimental beret. It was a proud moment.
I can imagine.
I bet.
Okay.
Do you think that military service should be something that we bring back as something that's compulsory?
Yeah, it didn't do me any harm, and I know a lot of soldiers have come from same backgrounds, and later in the podcast you'll hear what I've done, and if I can do it, then others can do it. Whether it's compulsory or not, I don't know, but I do think it did a lot for me with at the age of 16, 17, I was very inward. I wouldn't speak to people, and it's brought me out of my shell, and it's given me the skills that I've learned today. And I always say to young people that for me, if it wasn't for the army, coming from a council estate, I probably wouldn't have been able to afford all the great adventures I've done. I'm married now with 2 children. And I often think that they've got a different life. They haven't got the life I had. And, if I can inspire them to do well in their future careers as young adults, then, I think I've done well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because my dad was in the army, and he grew up in a mining town in County Durham. His dad was a miner. And it's almost, he got out there quite quickly, and we've lived all over the place and had a really nice life, I suppose. And he absolutely loved it. And it's almost what would have happened if Dad hadn't joined the army. Yes, Mum and Dad went to college together, so they knew each other anyway. So I might have already, I might have been born, but I might have been brought up in Seaham, and it feels like a weird alternative life, I suppose.
Yes, and it's funny you should say that you lived everywhere. I've been married now 24 years, and this is our 19th house we've lived in. 19th house. We've moved, and we've moved around the world and across the UK, and we've settled, in North Yorkshire. Yeah.
Good, as good a place as any to be. Good country. My mum hails from Yorkshire, so I'm often reminded that it's a great place to be. So talk us through some of the kind of, once you've got through the training, you've got your beret, what happens next then in the army? How are you assigned a role? What comes from that?
Yeah, so it depends on what regiment or corps you join. So I joined the infantry, which is I joined the King's Division, and under the King's Division in them days, I think there was 8 regiments, and I joined the Duke of Wellington's, as I said earlier. So once you've done your training, I think I got 1 week's leave, and then you have to report to where your battalion is. And my battalion at the time was stationed in Palace Barracks, just outside Belfast, a place called Hollywood.
That's in Northern Ireland. We lived there.
Fantastic. Yeah. A nice part of the world, I must say. And I joined the battalion at the age of 17, and then so many months. So I wasn't allowed out on the street, if you like, until I was 18 years old. So We did a lot, and then battalion life, you settle in with like-minded people. You're all from roughly the same geographical area across Yorkshire, and you get on with life, and it was great.
Cool. Talk us through all of the countries, 19 houses.
Yeah. So I got married when my third time in Northern Ireland. My wife's from Northern Ireland, and we lived in Ballykinler on the army base there. So from Ballykinler, we moved across to England. We lived in just outside Blackpool, Wheaton. And then from Wheaton, I left the army then after 9 years service. You think the grass is greener on the other side, and so I spent a year out of the army, and we went to live in Batley in West Yorkshire. And then we moved to London, Hounslow, West London in Hounslow. And then from there we moved to Germany, and we were in and out of Germany 3 times in and around Osnabrück. And then we'd moved to Warminster down in Wiltshire. And then when I left the army for the second time, after doing my 22 years, if you like, it was called colour service, where then you leave, you've done your time, you claim your pension, you draw your pension down. And I moved to Sedbergh in the Yorkshire Dales, and I worked in the school there for a short while. And I've always been, it was great, it was fantastic, but I've always been something burning inside, passionate about wanting to better myself and to do better. I think I'll speak later on. One of the things I learned in the army was to speak a couple of languages, but one of those languages was Arabic. And we ended up moving and living in 2 villas in Dubai. So we lived in Dubai, but I worked in 2 of the other Emirates, Al Ain and the capital, Abu Dhabi. And that was great. Then we moved back to the UK, and where we are now, we've moved about 3 or 4 times. So that, so totaling on our 19th move.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's how do you find Arabic then as a language to learn?
Yes. So, well, first off, I didn't learn languages in school. It was the army that gave me the passion, and I first learned the language of Serbo-Croat, the former Yugoslavia. So when I was posted out in Bosnia, one of the strangest things, I love communication and talking to people, and of course if you don't speak the same language as each other, and in the army on operations on the arts and mines, one of the tools is called a VCP, a vehicle checkpoint. So you talk to people. And I asked the interpreter one day, I said, could you ask the guy in the car what's his name and where's he going? And it was like a 10-minute conversation. I think I only asked him what was his name. So I thought, I'm going to learn the language, and I started to learn Serbo-Croat. Stravo kakosti, ja sam britanski vojnik. Hi there, I am from the British Army. But straight away, what I noticed was, the person that you were speaking to, they're in a war zone and they're very sad. But as soon as you started communicating, there was a huge beaming smile. So that was that. So when I lived in Germany, before we went to Kosovo, I sat at the table and I said to my wife, I'm going to learn some Kosovo Albanian. And so I learned some Albanian. And then when we went to Iraq, I did you do something called the MLAT, the Military Language Assessment Test at the Education Centre. And this is it's a made-up language. It's to see what your aptitude is to learn. And I failed the test by a couple of points. So I was gutted. But that pushed me, that drove me to learn off my own back. So when I got to Basra, Iraq, I was lucky, my job there was, if you like, was going out on patrol, speaking to the locals. And what was funny, the lads who did the course were stuck in camp because that was their job. So I ended up speaking more Arabic than what they did, although my Arabic was colloquial to Basra. When they did the course, it was kind of the Queen's English, the King's Arabic, if you like. So that's how I learned. And I think it was great to communicate with the locals, and that helped me through the tour. And that's one of the things that drove me to work in the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. But I must say, wherever you go around the world, people do speak good English. Or they want to learn. They speak very good English than what my Arabic was.
Mm. And it's also the fact that, you know, you try in their language and then they try and respond back like, no, I want to practice. And they're like, yo, I want to practice too.
A real life English person. I want to practice my English. It's often tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think speaking a second language, it can help you within that country. So when I've been working in schools recently, and one of the things I would say to young people would, you do your best you can, but the STEM type of activity, the science, technology, engineering, maths, English as well, and probably languages are important, because I think you'll agree, and your listeners will agree, when you transition from education into the world of work, you don't stop learning. So through that continued professional development, you continue to learn and develop. And for me, passing that information on to young people is great, and trying to inspire them to be their best.
And I found as well, it really opens up opportunities to different places. I think as well, it's not even just being able to communicate with a particular set of people that speak that language. It almost shows a curiosity or a thirst for knowledge, or wanting to get to know people in a different way. It shows something about the person, I think, not just the ability to say, well, I speak Arabic or Chinese or Spanish, whatever it might be. I think it's an important element to someone as well. Are there any other languages that you've ever fancied having a go at?
Well, I like the Arabic language. In fact, when I came, I did some courses over in Middlesbrough on the language. I paid to do some extra lessons, but I think if you've got a passion for something, then you can teach yourself. So I did look at Chinese, but it's getting your tongue around it. So an example would be when I went to Kosovo, because I could already speak a little bit of Bosnian, if you like, Serbo-Croat. Because in Kosovo, it was a mix. The communities was Serbo-Croat, small communities, but then the larger was the Albanian, the Kosovo Albanian. And just to say hello in Albanian, what is tongue jatjeta. And it took me a long time. I mean, I can say it now, but to get my tongue around it. But of course, like in English, they shortened that version. So when I got there, people would just say, instead of saying tongue jatjeta, they'd say tongue. Like in English, hello, hi. They shortened it. And I thought, crikey, it took me a long time to learn that. Just the one word. Yes.
No, it's
tricky,
great.
isn't it? They're all languages that are, or in the case of Chinese, Arabic, have got different alphabets as well, which I think makes it's another level of complexity, isn't it? When you can't necessarily read the language.
Yes.
So yeah, very admirable. You obviously been able to communicate with other people, learning languages, being in all these other different places. One thing I've found, not having been in the military, when I've been in corporates, when I've met former military personnel, I often see there's a very strong set of values or abilities in how they operate. What would you say that you've got from being in the military that you now take forward into any of the projects that you get involved with?
Well, I think when you look at the army, it teaches you to be self-reliant. You work in teams. You then get promoted to run that team, and then you run a bigger team. I suppose that's not too different from industry and business. But I think what drives people is when you practice your drills. And again, for me, when I speak to young people, time spent on rehearsals is seldom wasted, and practice. And that's what the army gives you, the discipline, the self-belief, and moving forward. Because when I look over my life, what I've achieved, and even in my own time, when I look at my hobbies, what I do, it's all about discipline, it's about learning, and business is no different to that. But I think being in the military, you have a sense of where you're doing it every day and you practice, and you've got other people around you, so you don't want to let the team down, and you've got like-minded people. So I think discipline leadership is evident. But I also think, I'm not an entrepreneur, but I think the Army breeds entrepreneurs in terms of the training you do. So as a young Lance Corporal, you learn to look after and administer 8 people within your section, so a section of 8 people or a team of 8 people. And then when you reach the ranks of sergeant, you run a platoon of round about 28 to 30 people. And as a company sergeant major, you run a company and administer of around about 120. And so the training courses you go on, 13 weeks here and 12 weeks there down at the Battle School in Wales, and the drills you go through, it almost gives you a sense of enterprising and entrepreneurship. So when you come up against a problem, when you do problem solving, you have courses of action 1 and maybe course of action 2 and 3, and you give yourself options. And of course, if one option doesn't work, you don't give up. You look at failing is learning, as entrepreneurs know, and moving forward. And if something doesn't work, you try something else. But I think equally, if you've got a plan, whether you're in business, an entrepreneur, or in the Army, if you've got a plan, you run with that plan, and then it may take you down a different avenue, and then you learn from mistakes and move forward.
Resilience and tenacity, I suppose, isn't it? That's like crucial.
It is, yes. And I always remember that word resilience. When I was a young soldier, 18, 19, 20, moving forward, what drove me was I always had a saying. I always said to myself, keep going, you'll get there eventually. And if I was on a long march, 10, 15 miles, I never stopped. I would eat on the move, drink on the move, just keep going. Whatever you was doing, my motto was, keep going, you get there eventually. And that is the modern day word resilience, I believe. Being resilient is fantastic. And if I could inspire the listeners and maybe young people listening to this, just don't give up. Take a day off, take a week off, revisit what you were looking at doing. But keep pushing, keep going, and eventually you will reach your goals.
Keep saying, I say that, it's from Finding Nemo though, just keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
Yeah.
Yes, the world has a way of working itself out.
So that you mentioned for younger people, so tell us a bit more about your youth engagement work as well, because that sounds interesting.
Yeah, so when I came back from Dubai, it was 2012, I took up this job in York initially, and it was the Army's youth engagement officer for the North East and the Yorkshire region, and this is what I'm doing now, but out of Catterick, out of 4 Brigade. And it's engaging with young people. I worked in schools with the Key Stage 3, the Year 7, 8s and 9s, and I have a colleague that does that. I work in an amazing team in Catterick. We do lots of community engagement, and one of my roles now is to work in the community. So I've worked in mosques and Sikh gurdwaras, temples, across training providers who are the custodians, if you like, of the young people that I look to inspire. I work with the Department for Work and Pensions, Job Centre Plus. It's great, and I've done some amazing projects over the last 8 years. One such project, as you're aware of, is the PI project, the Primary Inspiration for Enterprise, and I was involved with that over 3 years. I became a pioneer, and I was working with primary schools, as you know, across the North East, or the schools that signed up to the project. And it was great for me to meet and to give something back and to, again, inspire young people. And it was all about entrepreneur and enterprising, although I've not been an entrepreneur. And that kind of got me thinking why the Army makes entrepreneurs. And there's lots of people leaving the forces, setting up their own businesses. That's entrepreneurial. And it was good to inspire these young people. And during my time as a pioneer on the PI project, the 3 years I did it, my schools won, which was fantastic. I inspired them to push forward and to win.
They didn't just win though, they totally annihilated everybody else.
Yes. I mean, it was great. And for schools to walk away with the amount of money they did, but equally giving the young people what I call the key skills, the soft skills that every employer looks for when young people leave education to the world of work. The resilience we spoke about earlier, effective communication skills, working as a team, getting the job done, making a product and putting that product to market were all great business skills, entrepreneurial skills, and very, very enterprising. So my schools, one of the schools in Darlington was Reed Street Primary, and I went to meet the teachers first. We had a meeting before we met the young people, and we sat in a room with the pupils, and it was all about their ideas. But I think one of my jobs as well was to get the ideas out of them. And one young girl, bless her, she had an idea of selling cakes, making cakes, and it's a great idea, fantastic. One young boy wanted to make some comics, and again, a great idea. So we sat there with the teacher, and we spoke about, we've been given £100 seed funding. That we have to get that back at the end of the project. We have to make that money and invest, and how do we make a profit? And I spoke about, well, I know, because the teacher told me that the school's linked with lots of businesses, and we live in a digital age, and I'm very inspired by digital things. And we decided that if we sold a bun for 30 pence, if the pupils made a digital product that they could sell to the business in the community for £30, then which would, and I give it, playing devil's advocate, which would we go with? So we went with the latter, and I organised a meeting for the children to go and meet and sit around the board table of Duncan Bannatyne, Dragon's Den. So the kids were fantastic. They did a mini Dragon's Den, if you like, round the board table for Duncan Bannatyne, and the business was fantastic, and they ended up making just over £2,000 in the project, and of course they won it, and the winning cheque was £5,000. So the school walked away with £7,000, and I think for the school to have that extra money to put into what they used it for, the extracurricular, buying books for young people to read, and the second time I did that, it was the same type of project.
Yeah, there's lots of really good skills, aren't there? And I think we always say it, that the world's moving more to be digital, to be freelance. So the skills of, just as you've said, working as a team, problem solving, good communication, and it's the ability to make money. It's, if you're ever in a scenario where you lose a job, you're made redundant, or you find a way to do something you're passionate about, but you can look back and say, oh yeah, I remember we did with that guy from the army, we did this project where we made a shed load of money for the school.
Yeah,
we could do that again. Yeah, totally.
When I was 10.
I was 10 years old, and I'm like 20 now. Totally do.
We didn't use the full funding. I think we used something like about £10. So £10 made 2,000. And what they bought was, I think it was Reed Street. I mean, the website's not up there now. So they bought a domain name base. As entrepreneurs know, a domain name in your name was about 99 pence plus VAT. I think the VAT was 20 pence. So £1.19 for the domain name. And I showed them how to. So one of the things I'm interested in is digital stuff. And I showed them how to create a website using WordPress. And it was all drag and drop, pre-made templates, and the kids worked on the computers in ones and in twos and threes. So again, they were doing teamwork, communication, and they developed this website, and they promoted the businesses using. I think they used PowerPoint to make the adverts, and it was inspiring. And the second time I did this in Durham with the school there with Belmont, they did something similar, and they were doing animated videos for businesses, and again they made a load of money and ended up walking away with the winning cheque of £5,000 as well.
Yes, it was. Yeah, I was at the celebration for that one, and I was thinking, oh, there's some kids in there that we will want to hire when they get older.
Oh, yeah. we did some interviews with them all. It was It was brilliant.
Yeah. And it's great to be able to inspire the next generation coming forward.
Yeah, definitely. And my poor little boy is he's got two options, I suppose. It's go into the military or start a business.
And the army's not a bad choice.
No. Well, yeah, both of his granddads were in the army as well. So, and then
Yes.
I nearly went into, I walked into the army recruitment office in Middlesbrough and almost signed up to go to Sandhurst for the Adjutant General's Corps, but then I did my masters instead. I think I made a better psychologist than somebody in the army, because I think,
being told what to do doesn't go down well with Michelle, I've learned.
And I suppose if you run your own business and you're an entrepreneur, then you are the boss. But that's a good question, because when I talk to young people and they say about the military, I don't like to be told what to do, but I then kind of flip it. If you're working within the community in whatever business you go into, we all have to be told what to do, or do what we've been told, because we all have to work in a team, and every team leader will drive that team. And I suppose effectively everyone is told what to do anyway, whether you're in the military or not, and I think then they get it.
No, definitely. And I really struggled with that in organisations, so I could only imagine how much of a nightmare I would have been in the military. When I left my sort of second to last proper job, I gave the person that took my role that I hired to replace me, I gave her a list of 100 helpful humans that can get things done outside of processes. So I don't think I'd have done really well in the army. I think I would have been sacked, quite frankly. This is always like, but we can do this a slightly different way. It's like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, Michelle. The wheel's fine. No, it's fabulous. And so what is it that you do now? Tell us more about your current role.
Yeah, so it's going out and meeting people, inspiring them to be their best. And of course, during the last few months of COVID-19, it's been difficult because there's no face-to-face engagement. So I've come up with this, again, a digital platform. Everyone's using Zoom or Teams or Skype. Everyone's connecting more through digital. So I'm delivering a digital workshop, and I've titled, although it's still a pilot, so I'm going through the motions of, is it called a virtual employability workshop or a digital employability workshop? But it's one of inspiring young people, and my audiences have been mainly job centre plus customers. So it can inspire them to move closer to the labour market, maybe join the army. That's great, but the army's not for everybody. So I talked to them about their CV, because as everyone knows, to get a job, you've got to get your foot in the door with a CV, and then you get to interview. So if I've not inspired them to join the army, then what about joining the army reserve in their free time, in their spare time? And then the example would be, I used a driver and a chef and an engineer and a mechanic. You can do all this in the army reserve, and you're paid to do this. But the magic is, if it's for you, you're learning qualifications where you're being paid to do this. And those industry recognised qualifications that you pick up will get you a job in the community and take you off benefits, hopefully. So it's been a good pilot. We've had 7 applications of the first 2, which was fantastic. But I'm not the magic behind it. I set it all up. But what works is having the young soldiers on there, the young soldiers telling their backstories, because everybody's got a different story to tell from their transition from education into their world of work. So the peer-to-peer inspiration, I think, is the magic. And so that's what I'm doing at the moment. And hopefully in a few months, 2-3 months down the line, when we're allowed to go back out to engage, I can go back out and deliver my STEM activities, my science, technology, engineering, maths activities, or my team building activities, and delivering the message. And if I can inspire people to be motivated to do what they want, if they join the army, great. If they don't join the army, Well, at least they've had that army engagement, and they know about the army then. Because what I give everybody is a certificate of achievement, and those who are 16 plus, I've created a CV paragraph for them to inspire at future interviews. And by me doing that, if the army wasn't for them, then they've had a good experience, and they may come across friends or other colleagues that the army might be for them, and they can talk good about the army, hopefully.
Yeah.
I think I would have really loved joining the reserves, actually. I think that was probably something I regret, actually, in my life. Way too old now, sadly. I think you have to be under 35, don't you?
No, you can. I think it's in the 48, I believe it is.
Oh,
So to 55, yeah.
Interesting.
Never say never.
We'll be Googling that after.
I know. We're like, James, I have a new idea. That's interesting. Cool. So tell us a little bit more about your accidental STEM activity in Iraq.
Yeah, I can do.
Well then.
So when I was in Iraq, one of the things through the Arts and Minds, you want to engage with the local population. You lived in there for 6-7 months, and so you had a certain area that your patrol would always look after. And I'd come across, well, there's a couple of incidents where I'd like to, before I speak about the STEM activity, and this is where Arts and Minds comes in, this is where the language comes in, and treating people with respect, and you get something back. So I got to know, we lived in this hotel, and the hotel was it was called the Shatt Al Arab River Waterway. Hotel in Arabic is Funduk. So we lived in the Funduk Shatt Al Arab, the hotel, and it was kind of, the hotel was run down, it was made into a patrol base. And the waterway, the Shatt Al Arab waterway, was quite wide, and in the middle was an island. And it was kind of cigar shaped, so it was known as Cigar Island. And I got to know these local families, and we showed them how to farm the land, if you like. And this was a STEM activity, and it was rock hard with the baking sun during the day, and the ground was hard. And you have something called R&R, rest and recuperation. So you'd go home for 2 weeks, part way through your operational tour. And I always remember going to B&Q, and I bought a load of grass seeds. And I took the grass seeds back with me, and we showed them how to use this kind of cover, tarpaulin, to shade the ground from the midday heat. And we showed them to make four pens, and they got them to rake up the ground and to put loads of water on it, plant the seeds, and the grass grew like a bright green grass in the middle of this island. And showed them how to, I think you had 2 sheep and a goat, and to go from one pen, once the grass had been eaten, you put them in the next pen. You got the idea. Get to the end pen, hopefully then the first pen would have started growing, and that was great, and they loved it. And and that was, for me, that was Arts and Minds, and I forgot all about it. And the tour goes on, and one day the insurgents they'd planted 2 rocket-propelled grenades facing towards the patrol base, the hotel, if you like, and they were set on a timer to go off at 12 o'clock midday, when soldiers would have been having their lunch and queuing up. And this local who I helped out, we did the growing the grass and the STEM activity. He got in his boat and he rowed across, and he got to a police checkpoint, and he alerted everybody, and we went out. And actually it was my patrol that went out to set out the cordon for the explosives, the bomb disposal to stop it from going off. So that was so one good deed led to another good deed. So when I went into schools, I spoke about doing good deeds and how something doing good for somebody could come off and come back on you tenfold. And by that, I believe, it saved lives. So that was the activity. That was my STEM activity in Basra, Iraq.
Yeah, it's amazing. Okay. It's proper. Yeah, bit of crop rotation in there, which is great, and a little bit of building good relationships with people and helping them, and it came back more than tenfold, I would imagine, that one. Okay, do you want to talk to us a little bit about you receiving your MBE and your commendations? So
yeah, definitely. So during my time in Iraq, our patrol base came under mortar attack and rocket attack on an almost nightly basis, and previous to that, I'd done some undercover work, and I've been in the reconnaissance platoon, and I approached the battle group 2IC, and I always remember saying, let's do something about this. Let's go out there, send out our recce patrol, and let's try and capture them. Again, luckily, in the area of Sikek, round where they were firing the mortars from and the rockets, we got on with the locals, and the locals would say to us that these men had come from the south of the city, and they weren't local to where they lived, and they didn't want them there. So we set up this system, and cut a long story short, in the end, we went out undercover, trying to catch them, and we caught them in the end, and saving lives. So when I read my citation, there was around about 500 soldiers and contractors within the base, if you like. So it's definitely saved lives, and that was great for me, because you've got to do something positive and not just be there and take the rockets. So I wanted to go out there and capture these people, or to at least, and they were caught red-handed, and they were then taken away by the police. And from that day onwards, we weren't mortared again. So they caught the mortar team, which was fantastic. So that was the commendation for that one. And then when I was in Kosovo, I was north of Pristina, the capital, and again it was the language that helped me out with the locals, and we got to know. You're there for 6-7 months, and you get to know the locals. And I must say, in Iraq and Kosovo, the locals didn't have anything. They didn't have money, they didn't have food, but what they did have, they would give you. You'd have coffee through meetings. They'd make you a coffee and a chat, and they'd put a big spread on for you. It was amazing. And one day, one of the elders went missing, and I suppose one side was blaming the other side. And so I was a corporal at the time, and through my experience of being in the army through the reconnaissance platoon doing searches, we cut the area up, if you like, on a map, and we searched the railway line, and we didn't find him. And all along, the family were blaming he'd been kidnapped, and so what happened was I got the backing of the commanding officer, which was great. I got an helicopter, and I went up in the helicopter, and we did an area search. And then in the afternoon, there was a river, and what I couldn't see from the helicopter because of the overgrowth, the bushes and the trees, I indented, if you like, got a dog handler with his search dog, and we searched the fields and the area, and lo and behold, we found him. He was in the river. God bless him. But what happened was he died of natural causes. I think it was emphysema, and so it was very, very, I say political, because one side was blaming the other, and of course we were north of Pristina, and the police wanted to take him to the hospital to an autopsy. And so I said to the family, because they were Serbians, and in the town there were Albanians, and it was the Albanian hospital. So I promised that I would go with the elder from the family, and I would be there during the autopsy. But the autopsy was carried out by a Canadian pathologist anyway, and it was proven that he died of natural causes. So that kind of lowered the tensions. That's what I received my commendation for. But the MBE was out of the blue. I took on this job 2012, 2013, and working into 2014, working with young people on the cusp of maybe going down the wrong side of the law, and with other agencies. He was working with Red Cat Council and others in the army. And to give young people hope and bring them back in line, if you like, and give them some kind of, belief and inspire them to move forward. In fact, one young lad joined the army, and I believe he's still in as a corporal. He's a corporal now in the engineers, and yeah, fantastic. And he came from a low social background of, I was a council estate, similar to myself. And I always remember him ringing me up one day saying, "I'm in the army, it's great. I'm now." I said, "Well, you're not just in the army. You're now on. I think if you join as a private soldier now, your salary is around £20,000. That was great." And I said, "Now you can take your girlfriend out for a meal. You can buy your mum and dad Christmas presents, because it was near Christmas, and that was fantastic." And so what happened was, I it was Christmas Eve. My in-laws were over from Northern Ireland, and the telephone rang in the hallway, and I went to answer it, and it was the brigadier. And he said, "Sir Major, it's the brigadier here. I've got some good news for you." I said, "Also," and my wife. My wife thought somebody had died because I went pure white. She said afterwards, and he said, "You can tell your family, but look out on the New Year's honours list. You're going to be presented with an MBE." And I was lost for words. I didn't know what to say. It was fantastic, but it was a team effort, and it was a community effort, and it was great. And again, I suppose now looking back, that's one of the other things that inspires me to give out, to help young people, to promote. There is something out of, if I come from a council estate and if I've done what I've done, there's no reason why you can't do what you want to do. It's to inspire people. So I suppose that's the journey I've gone down. And it's one of, you just don't know what's going to happen in life. Because if somebody said to me when I was leaving the army, you're going to end up living in Dubai on a big salary, I wouldn't have believed them, and it happened. And you almost make things happen. Continue to work at your goals and plug away, and you never know what happens in life. So that's the story of the MBE and the commendations.
Yes, super inspirational.
You never know where you can get to just from a decision to walk into the recruiting office in Bradford.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
That's brilliant. Okay. So we are going to move on to the quick fire round now. And I think it's James's turn to ask the first question.
Okay, so question number 1. What is your secret talent?
My secret talent is, not many people do know about, although I've said it now, is speaking and learning languages. I'm inspired now to learn a language. But my secret talent is, during my spare time, I like to do a lot of digital stuff, and I've recently learned how to rank businesses on first page Google, on first page images of Google, and on Google videos, but also on YouTube. So through, I suppose, embedding code into video and knowing how to put that on the internet, ranking businesses on first page, so which I think that's quite cool.
Yeah, definitely.
It's very useful.
A lot of people pay a lot of money to for that service, so great. Okay, so question number 2 is, what's your favourite season and why?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when you're in a season and we're just about to go into the next one, oh, I love spring. It's fantastic. But then when it comes into winter, I love winter because it's Christmas and it's Christmas here. And then when you've had enough of that, you can't wait for the spring again and the summer. So but if I had to pick one of them, I would say spring. I like spring. New life, flowers, the lambs and the calves being born, new life moving forward.
No, it's almost, it's hopeful, isn't it, spring?
Yes.
And then question number 3, who is the best role model a person can have?
Well, if you've got children, I think it's the father for young men, and the mum for the girls. But moving forward, I think it's inspirational people within the community, within the family, I would say. So growing up, for me, my role models were, I took on the surname of Hill when I was 9. We moved, to the council estate where we lived, and I suppose it's the father figure, and it may be in school as well, inspirational teachers. But for me in the army, and my role models were my section commander, my platoon sergeant, my platoon commander, and you wanted to inspire to be like they were. And when I was a sergeant major, looking back, I thought I was a modern day sergeant major, and I wanted the best out of my soldiers. And it's great now when people come to you and say, you've inspired me. And I can tell you a quick little story. And years later, I was kicking myself not knowing the soldier's name. I was very fortunate after being on the tour in Iraq that I was posted down to the Operational Training Advisory Group, OPTAG, in Folkestone. And that's where people go and do the soldiers and the officers do the training before they deploy in operations. And I remember being in my second year, there was a staff sergeant from the signals, and he came up to me and said, "Can I have a quiet word with you?" I thought, "Oh, crikey, what's happened? What have I done now?" So we went off to one side, and he said to me, he said, "I'd like to thank you." I said, "Okay. Did you enjoy the lesson?" He said, "No, I was on your training course a year ago, last year, sort of thing." And he said, "The drills you taught us when we went to Afghanistan saved our lives." And I thought, well, crikey, I didn't know what to say. I was humbled. I said, well, I'm glad it worked. And again, that for me, although I kind of inspired him, that inspired me as well to train people to do the best that I can for them.
Yeah.
No.
Very powerful.
Absolutely. Okie dokie. So if we could get a time machine working and take you back to 18-year-old Mark, what advice would you give to him?
That's a good question as well. Lots of advice. I think one of the main ones, when I joined the army, when people join the army, most people are not married because you're young, you're 16, 17, 18, 19. And you have got lots of money. You've £20,000 a year for a young person is surplus money. You have lots of surplus money. And I suppose telling my 18-year-old self would be invest, buy a property, buy something where, property, I suppose, bricks and mortar. And if I'd have bought property when I was younger, because I always remember another soldier, he did that, and he bought property, and, he made a fortune in buying and selling. And because I didn't know that, I think today is different because people are given that kind of advice, what you're going to do with your money, and have you thought about investing in properties? So I think investment in property.
That's powerful advice.
It's a good one, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's suppose if you've got what you say, that cash line around, it's very easy to, we spoke with, what was Matt recently, wasn't it? And his advice that he'd go and spend all his spare money on beer and same sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Put it away into something that will secure a future, isn't it? So it's, yeah. That's good.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
So if any of our listeners want to get in touch, want to find out more about youth engagement, etc., where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, so we obviously have an army website, but I'm not on there. So how would you find Mark Hill? I suppose if you Googled Mark Hill MBE, that will come up. But I'm on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
My Twitter handle is @Mark Hill MBE, and I'm on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, Mark Hill MBE. And I suppose they're the best ways if you wanted to see what I'm doing. I suppose if you Google my name, as I said, you'll be able to see and go into photos. You'll see lots of photos that we've done over the years, on some of the projects we've worked on. I suppose there's that way.
Well, if you weren't able to rank first on the first page for your own name,
Well, if you put in Mark Hill, it comes up with the famous hairstylist. If you just put MBE on the end, you'll come up with me.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, it has been an absolute blast talking to you, Mark. So thank you ever so much.
Yeah, likewise. It's really nice speaking with you.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.